For leadership.
All right, everybody, it's 1 o'clock. I think all of us are here who are want to be here. I hope everybody got some lunch and is ready to roll with our December Regional Commission meeting. First off, if everybody would stand please for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We did receive a request for remote participation for medical reasons prior to the meeting from Mr. Edgerton, and you just heard. But per the adopted policy, we need for the members here in person to approve the remote participation. So we need a motion.
So moved. Second.
They all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for being here, John.
Thank you for
Okay.
allowing me to.
Absolutely. Okay, would you call the roll then for the rest of us?
Mr. Ashby, Mr. Butler, Mayor Catlin,
Here.
Mayor Pointer, Mr. Crozier,
Here.
Mr. Curry,
Here.
Mr. Deal, Ms. Donahue,
Here.
Mr. Edgerton,
Here.
Mr. Hively,
Here.
Mr. Jackson, Mayor Lamar, Mr. McCullough,
Here.
Mayor Roby,
Here.
Mayor Sisson, Ms. Taylor,
Here.
Mr. Voorhees, Mr. Weekly,
Here.
Mr. Woods. Here. You have
If everybody's looked at the agenda, are there any changes, additions, anything? No.
Second.
Motion and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I don't see any members of the public here. Did you hear from anybody, Patrick?
not for the meeting.
Okay, so we will skip public comment then, and we will move to presentation for special recognition. As some of you are aware, Commissioner Ashby did not run for another term on the Remington Town Council and will be departing our commission. We have a resolution thanking him for his 11+ years on the commission. We need a motion to adopt that, and then we'll read the resolution.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And Patrick, if you'll read the resolution.
A resolution recognizing the work and service of Evan H. Skeet Ashby III. Whereas the Rappahannock-Rapidan Regional Commission serves the counties of Culpeper, Fauquier, Madison, Orange, and Rappahannock, and the towns of Culpeper, Gordonville, Madison, Orange, Remington, the Plains, Warrenton, and Washington, and is known as Planning District 9. And whereas Mr. Evan H. Skeet Ashby III was appointed to the commission by the town of Remington in October of 2011. And whereas Mr. Ashby served on the commission from the time of his appointment until December of 2022. And whereas Mr. Ashby represented the town of Remington enthusiastically and with a collaborative approach consistent with the mission of the commission. And whereas Mr. Ashby worked diligently and unreservedly with fellow members of the commission to advance the mission of the commission and to enhance coordinated planning across the Rappahannock-Rapidan region, and to enhance the commission's work and interaction with the town of Remington by engaging commission staff for technical assistance and support of the town transportation planning and mapping opportunities, and was an active voice in support of other priorities of the commission. Now therefore be it resolved that the commission hereby recognizes Mr. Evan H. Skeet Ashby III and extends its sincere appreciation for his dedicated service and contributions to the commission and the Rappahannock-Rapidan region, adopted this 14th day of December 2022 by the Rappahannock-Rapidan Regional Commission. I would say I've spoken with Rachel, who's the town clerk in Remington. Mr. Ashby, as you all may know, has been in and out of rehabilitation facilities for the past couple of years with some health issues. And when I spoke with her last week, was in a rehab facility right now. My hope is to be able to present this to him at the next council meeting, which is next week. If that doesn't work out, then probably in January, whenever he's available at an upcoming town council meeting in Remington. So. And just from my own perspective, I mean, I think Mr. Ashby was always at the end of the table. I think most of us would say that he was always someone that would kind of share things about Remington, but really enjoy just the fellowship and the collaborative effort here on the commission, and I think just enjoyed being here from all my conversations with him. So,
Well, thank you, Patrick, and we certainly do wish him well, and do pass on our best to him. Okay, next up is approval of the minutes. We've got the August 24th meeting minutes in your packets. Does anybody have any changes or issues with the minutes? We need a motion to approve those. Is there a second to adopt the minutes?
Second.
Okay, any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor of adopting the August 24th meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll move on to the financial reports. We have the draft FY 2022 agency audit. So Patrick and Terry, I guess, are going to give us some information.
Yeah, I can kind of go through some of the highlights for this. The one thing I would say is that this year's audit took a lot. We did not receive it. Typically, we receive our audit in October before the October commission meeting. Obviously, we had our annual meeting and did not have a regular meeting, but we also didn't receive the draft audit until just a couple of weeks ago. So Terry and myself have reviewed. We've gone through it and really don't have significant changes or anything, but the point being is that typically we provide this before the October meeting and give the commission time to review it and then ask for adoption in December. We are asking for adoption today just so that we can submit the audit to grantees or grantors that require that typically within 6 months of the end of the fiscal year. So the highlights for me, the couple of things that I just want to note is the first one, if you're on the page, if you have the copy of it, page 31, page 32 is just the auditor's report on internal controls. And as with past years, I want to make sure I got the wording right since they worded in such a way as to remove any, I think, liability on their part. But really, we're in terms of the things that they reviewed, they report on the internal controls and then also compliance with grants and financial requirements for laws and regulations, not only in Virginia, but the federal grants that we have. So during the audit, there's no deficiencies in internal control that they identified that they would consider material weaknesses, which is good. And they also, with their tests of compliance, they found no issues or no instances of non-compliance. That's consistent with our past years, but it is important to note based on the financial procedures and policies that we have in place. If going back up in the audit and just kind of hitting on the main financial points. So on page 8 of the audit, we have our statement of financial analysis, summary statement of net position. Current assets, and that doesn't include the capital assets or our net pension assets, increased by about 76,394 from June 30, 2021 to June 30, 2022. The net position as of June 30, 2022 increased to 778,653. Much of that increase is due to the GASB 68 adjustment. So you can see last year on the number here on last year we had a GASB adjustment that actually was a decrease this year. So that represents almost 170,000 difference there. And so a lot of the change in net position that you see is related to that GASB adjustment, which is related to the ERS, our pension plan. Capital assets, which is the commission office space, and then some of the technology investments that we have just in terms of computers and things of that nature. We've got, as of June 30, 2022, we carry a balance on the building of the loan on the building of 141,474. That's at 4.75% and is through July of 2029. In the past, we've talked about potentially considering paying the loan off early. I think at some point that may come up again as a valid discussion point for the commission if that was the desire to pay off the loan. That's really the only long-term debt that we have. And then, there's one slight correction, and it's not related to the financials. It's just related to where the one of the expenses was allocated. Page 6 and page 11, it identifies band pool expenses of $2,318. Those are actually Virginia Homeless Solutions Program, so related to our housing and homelessness work. Those are expenses related to that. So the money is right, the 2,318, just the category of band pool is incorrect. So we'll ask the auditor to make that change, but it doesn't change the bottom line, as it were. And then, really the last statement I would make is that overall the commission remains in strong and stable financial position. We don't anticipate any changes to that outlook over the next 12 months from staff's perspective. So I'm happy to answer questions if there are any on the audit, but again, I think other than being a little bit slower to receive the audit this year, always in order as it has been in the past as well.
What is the or monthly payment for the debt on the building?
Terry,
1993, $1,993.
And do you envision the need for larger space at any time down the road?
I appreciate that question, Mr. McCullough. Potentially, I think, we've been able to, because of remote work, a lot of our work can be completed remotely. Most of our staff right now is in the office, 3 days a week, and remotely working 2 days a week. Depending on, the commission's perspective of specific programs, we contract out a lot of our work with the Regional Transportation Collaborative to the Community Services Board. If there was a desire to have those individuals in one spot, then it could be something where we would have the space. Same thing for Foothills Housing Network. I think, there's a lot of times where there might be benefit to space for specific programs. Right now, we are in a position where we've got, one cubicle sort of set up with a staff person in it, and then 2 people sort of in our shared space out in the middle of the office, and that's really it. The other offices are completely full. So it's a possibility. I don't think we're at the point where I would say we absolutely need to do that right now, but I think it's worth looking into it next.
Yeah, no, I would welcome the discussion about that, especially in regards to if we have the assets to pay the loan off. We could essentially pay the loan off and then and if we have the financial wherewithal to take the money that we were paying towards the loan and start banking it for either a down payment on a new place, if we need a larger place, whatever. But we think about that longer term, even if it's 5 years down the road or 10, you could build up some money that could help purchase something that would be larger and necessary at some point.
And as you walked in, those of you in the room today, you may have seen that the space next door is for sale right now. This space that we own is about 3,300 square feet. The office space next door, I think, is in the, I want to say 1,400 square feet. Last I looked was listed at about 300,000, which is certainly was okay. Probably fair, but I think within the market. But it's been sitting for several months. So it's something we've talked about informally, but not in any long term.
Also, what are the association fees a month?
So yeah, in our office park here, we pay it's quarterly. It has been for us, Terry, $490 a quarter.
Just under 500.
It's going to go up beginning January 1. I think for us probably about $60. So it's about $2,200 a year, and that's
with a potential new space down the road. You can do away with your association fees possibly, and have a larger facility that's
right. And some of that, so with the association fees, that's really snow removal in the winter, landscaping and maintenance the rest of the year, and then various like the light that we pay for, just
and
for
I know
security.
it seems like since the pandemic, parking has not been as bad, but prior to that, it was impossible, I guess is the nicest way.
Mhm.
And I think pandemic certainly plays into it. Also, the fact that the social work board, the Association of Social Work Boards, which owned probably about 40% of the building space here, they built a new facility in the town of Culpeper on East Chandler Street. With them not here, that's removed a lot of it. We have seen one of those buildings was sold to a CPA firm. The one that's vacant next to us, I think, is going to sell early in 2022 or 2023. So we'll see. But I think also because a large number of the individuals, the other organizations as well, are not using that same parking that the issues we had with DMV or when it was full when the office work was full.
So that begs the question about whether or not, if you're happy where you are now and the building next door is open, is it something to look at to pay the remainder of this loan off and then see what the amount of a loan you would need to buy that extra 1,400 square feet?
Or would it be better on this way? This is the same building, correct?
It is, yeah.
And that's open too?
That one has been with a for sale sign for about 5 years.
Maybe you could do a little bit of research in regards to what that would look like financially and what type of loan you would have to carry for each one of those. Because if we can acquire more space and not increase the loan cost,
Right.
we could take care of your problem at a later date. And frankly, we could even talk about maybe a slightly larger conference room, you know? when we- it seems like it might be we might be in a good position to take a look at that now.
Yeah, I can definitely do. I mean, like I said, I know just offhand what they were listed at, but yeah, I can definitely get them to do some more research on that and bring that back for executive committee or commission at a future date.
Yeah, not only in this complex, but maybe just take a look at what's out there, other commercial space and for comparison.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, certainly avoiding this $2,000 a year fee might be something to consider as well.
That $2,000 a year fee, you're gonna be paying anyway, because you're gonna have to get snow removal, you're
Well,
gonna have to get a
that's
dumpster, you're
true.
gonna have to get a lot of that stuff anyway, so I'm not sure that you're gonna
Yeah, you might not.
save
say
that.
That's true. Unless any of us want to pick up a shovel every time it snows and, you know, kind of get out and do it ourselves.
And I can say, I mean, you know, by virtue of having been here longer than some of the other owners in the office park, I'm currently serving as the office park president, but finding some of those,
Conflict of interest there.
finding some of the, you know, 2 years ago, we had the landscaping contract that had been in place for probably a dozen years. In February, said, yeah, you know, I'm not gonna do it anymore. And then trying to find somebody that, you know, would take that on, because it's relatively simple. I mean, we're not a huge, you know, it's not a huge space. And so, yeah, that process can be, you know, somewhat trying at times. But yeah, I would agree with Mayor Catlin's statement that those costs are going to be, you know, we're going to find those anywhere, whether it's us paying for it ourselves in a single space that we own, or whether it's in another office park as well.
Any other thoughts on the money? I guess we need an approval to adopt the audit.
Yeah, we would like adoption of the audit unless there are outstanding questions that we can answer.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. No further discussion. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. I guess next up is the year-to-date financial report.
Yeah, bring that up on the screen. All right, so this is through November, so the first 42% of the FY 2023. Revenues are about 35.5% of budget, and that's largely because frankly our budget this year is larger than it has been in past years. So typically we spend most of the year with our revenues exceeding the percentage of the year gone through, but since we have a lot of project expenses this year, we're a little bit behind. That includes the PDC Housing Development Program, our NIFWIP grant that we have, where again, we expect some of those to come in. In one case, in the PDC Housing Development Program, we've had a payment come in December that was a significant revenue and then expense that'll go back out, but just didn't show at the end of November. Expenses are lowered about 26%. Operating expenses are very much in line at 39% of the budget through 42% of the year. And again, project expenses are lower than we are just based on our spending and typically the reimbursement process. So all in all, I think we're in a good spot. I do anticipate coming back in February or potentially April, just depending on timing with the amended budget, just based on spending and things that we know as we go through. But I don't anticipate major changes on that, just largely would be projects where we're not going to spend at the pace that we thought we would. That would also reflect in the expenses as well as the revenues. We don't need any action on this, but I'm happy to answer questions if there are any.
Any concerns, questions?
Just say that there's a possibility that Rappahannock will approach the commission at some point in time to function as a grant recipient agency for us. We don't have an EDA, IDA, and so we've had some preliminary conversations.
And I think Mr. Curry brings a good point. If we did that in the past for the CARES Act, the business assistance program that Rappahannock had, in a similar where we basically just served as receive the funds and then pass them back out to the county or, in that case, their contractors approval, and have done the same thing for the town of Washington as well. So it's certainly a function the commission can perform for any member jurisdiction if that makes sense, based on your needs as well. So.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to highlights from the executive director's report.
So again, as mentioned earlier, and I thank everybody that was able to come up to the annual meeting, and certainly thank Ms. Donahue for her assistance in not only identifying and securing the location at the Miller Barn there at the end of Mount Vernon Farm, but just for all the support and getting things organized there. I thought everything went well. We had a lot of hiccups kind of leading up to it that made it a little bit different than some of our past, but I thought the facility itself was just so unbelievable that everybody that was there. I mean, the speech that Ms. Donahue gave that gave the history of the barn itself. I just thought you could kind of sit there and get lost looking up at the rafters and everything. So amazing space. And again, it was appreciative of both of the award winners, Chief Jenkins from the town of Culpeper and Hal Hunter from the county, able to be there. And I think they were both really just super glad to receive it and to be recognized for that. So thank you again to everybody that was there. We're fully staffed. I've got two new people here today. So John Otto in the back. John actually was hired just after the last commission meeting in August and started just after Labor Day. But some of you, I think, met him at the annual meeting. But John is our GIS planner doing rural transportation and GIS work. And then Lindsay Morris next to him. Lindsay started just a week ago. She's rideshare and outreach specialist. We're working with our commuter services program, but also, kind of learning all about all the programs commission has to kind of help us with communications and outreach and things like that. Both have a long history here in the region. Lindsay was spent a lot of her childhood here, and John has been here for quite a while in Culpeper. Just super excited to have them both on board. And it's nice to have no vacancies, knock on wood here for a while. It's just, that process takes some time. So yeah, glad to have both of them there.
I have to say, I think Mr. Voorhees and I share common real estate, city of Fayetteville. You were the manager there for a little bit. I was GIS staff prior to you, but
Shake your head knowingly, Ted.
I know, and he came in after I had already left.
Yeah. So as I mentioned too, we did get our first kind of large reimbursement from the PDC Housing Development Program. So that was to help Skyline cap their purchase of what used to be called Barbara's House in the town of Madison, was owned by the Madison Emergency Services Agency. Skyline has purchased that. They are beginning renovations inside to convert it from 5 bedrooms to 5 units and adding a 6th unit. So we've processed the piece that helped them with the purchase, and then we'll be reimbursing them a little bit for some of their renovation expenses. Jennifer and I are going to give an update just in the next agenda item on the overall program, but that we're glad to see the money actually start moving. We put a lot of work into that specific project, but also the other projects, and it's nice to see that begin to actually have some actual reimbursements going through with it. So. You'll probably see more over the next month, but we've talked a lot about the FAMS call center, so Foothills Area Mobility System. They are rebranding based on the Regional Transportation Collaborative, which Kristen presented on in August, and really to kind of show that the FAMS call center, which is what it's been phrased as for part of a decade, they do a lot more than just sit and take calls. It's a lot of interactive, whether it's through the website. Or calls or out in the community. So rebranding to the RTC, the Mobility Center, just to reflect those services. So more information on that will be coming out in our newsletter and elsewhere over the next month or so. 2 grant requests that we put in. One has gone in a year ago to VDEM and to FEMA for hazard mitigation plan update. We are still waiting on that process to work itself out at FEMA's level. Everything, I check in with VDEM about once a month and they say, we haven't heard anything yet. The downside of that is that our 5-year plan end date is December of next year. And so the longer FEMA takes to approve our grant to do it, the more compressed our time frame for updates is going to be. But continue to push that back to VDM and say, that's fine. If they're not going to fund us, then it's just going to either result in a worse product or us going over our deadline. And so they hopefully understand that. Whether that makes a difference, we'll see. Same thing with, we had back in April had put in a request, or excuse me, in March to DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation, for to tie in with the hazard mitigation plan, resilience, flood resiliency plan through the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. We received feedback from DCR staff in September that we were not awarded, but they were added on sort of the wait list, and they needed a little bit more information, which we provided to them in November. We should know by the end of this month whether that's funded. My plan for both of those is to tie those two pieces of funding together, along with contribution that we would make in terms of staff time, and have them completed together, because they really do run in parallel with each other. So we'll hopefully be doing that mostly in 2023, although it seems likely that it might go into 2024 just based on waiting on those funding applications. And then the last two things, Jennifer is our staff lead. We're working with Madison County on their comprehensive plan update, and they've had a kickoff meeting for that back in early November. And we anticipate that to go certainly into next year. But appreciate Mr. Weekly and his staff for reaching out and allowing us to partner with them and to provide the assistance that they were looking for. And then the last thing, tomorrow morning, weather, not really dependent, we'll do it virtually if the weather's bad. We're going to have our second regional planners roundtable. So this is staff in your planning and community development departments and economic development as well. Just convening them on mostly for a quick presentation on the project or a program from the commission's perspective that we can share with them. But then many of them had indicated a similar interest, I think, as you all do with your roundtable. We just sort of hear what's going on elsewhere. So we're happy to provide that forum for them. So that's going to be tomorrow morning. And I'm happy to answer questions if there are any on that or any other subject.
Have you heard anything about the regional water supply plan study?
Yeah, just the directive from DCR, I guess the Secretary of Natural Resources, for counties not to do anything until the new regulations have worked their way through. 2023. Yeah. I have not heard whether, I think the regulations are kind of working through that process at the state level. But I actually did hear on Friday that initial thought is that there's not going to be money for those plans, no matter what the regional level is. So, see how that works itself out. For those of you that weren't there in June, the regional water supply plan, previously a region could be a county and its incorporated towns, or multiple counties. And in this region, it was each of the 5 counties with their incorporated towns had their own water supply plan. The General Assembly and the state have decreed that now it has to be at a regional level that they drew a map of, and that's our 5 counties. But we don't know what that process will look like yet.
Anyone have anything else? Lots going on, as always. We will move on then to staff updates. As you recall, the commission approved initial allocation of funding for the DC Housing Development Program back in February. Jennifer and Patrick are going to give us some updates on how that's progressing.
Yeah, so I appreciate the opportunity here. As Chair Taylor mentioned, in February, we brought the initial recommendation from staff for the projects that have been submitted for the housing development program. So give a quick update on the projects that we initially allocated funding for, and then we do have a request for consideration of reallocation of some of those funds, just based on some of the information I'll provide here. So quick review, last July received PDCs across the state, the 21 regional commissions received funding from Virginia Housing to support, development of affordable housing, putting units on the ground or supporting units on the ground. Process we used was in December, we sought proof of concept for developers, for-profit or not-for-profit, received 9 proofs of concept at that time. After review of that and discussions with those that had submitted, received 7 applications in January and February, presented to the commission a recommendation which you approved for allocating funding to 6 partner organizations for those projects. So you can see here, a little bit small, but these were the approved allocations in February. So that was for some large multifamily Culpeper Community Development Corporation, People Incorporated, both in the town of Culpeper, Fauquier Habitat for Humanity in the town of Warrenton, Community Services Board with a project in the town of Orange, Foothills Housing Corporation with adaptive reuse in Fauquier County, and Skyline Cap in Madison, which I mentioned before. We had talked about it as well, but we had pulled 10% just as a budget item to support our staff time and administration of the grant at the initial phase of this. So that's where the $2 million that we had received, where that was budgeted as of February. So since February, we've worked with the applicants that were approved with the allocations. We've got 4 finalized agreements. Again, as I mentioned, with Skyline Cap, with Foothills Housing Corporation, Culpeper Housing Development Corporation, and People Incorporated. We've confirmed their intentions for those projects to complete construction by June 30, 2024, which is the deadline set by Virginia Housing. In 2 cases, in the case of Culpeper Community Development Corporation and People Incorporated, those are using low-income housing tax credits, and so they have a little bit longer based on the fact that those funds are beginning to be awarded or were awarded, and they will be able to begin to use those between now and 2023, but they have through December 2024 to use those funds. So they will have to show us that they've made progress on this, but we anticipate being able to extend them a little bit longer based on that funding. We've also worked with Fauquier Habitat, who proposed, kind of came back and based on that deadline of June 30, 2024, indicated that maybe they were a little bit ambitious on that project and felt like it wasn't going to be something they could commit to. That also, not just the timeline, but because of rising costs, I think they felt a little bit concerned about being able to get that project done. So they did propose to us an alternative project in lieu of the one that was awarded, and we'll kind of go through what that project is in just a few minutes. We've also begun, sort of in follow-up to this, we've continued to kind of engage with local stakeholders, whether it's local government staff or nonprofit developers, other stakeholders across the region, in working on a regional housing strategy and framework for a housing alliance or some sort of housing group that would be available to. In Charlottesville, they call it a housing partnership. We don't really have the right language yet, but I think that's the sort of the direction that it's going and what we might be able to support through that. So for Skyline, this is the building I talked about. The agreement was signed in June 2022, and they completed the purchase in July. There's 5 existing units. This used to be a transitional housing, a transitional shelter owned by Mesa. It had been vacant for a couple of years. Skyline is going to create a 6th unit in the facility as part of the renovation and refurbishment, and they're adding a washer and dryer in each unit. Previously, there was a single washer and dryer for the entire building. And Jennifer, I think, encouraged them, this would make a lot more sense if you were able to do that, and they figured out a way to have that done. The reimbursement of $200,000 towards the purchase was completed, as I said, last week, and we will reimburse additional funds for true construction costs for them over the next few quarters. It's right adjacent to Skyline's main office space right on Main Street in Madison, so it's a really good project right in town. Very excited for that one to be moving forward. Foothills Housing Corporation. So this is the old Ben and Mary Steakhouse on Route 17 north of Warrenton. Agreement was signed in September. It's going to create 4, 1 to 2 bedroom units in the space. The Fauquier County Board approved a special exception in October 2022 to allow the work to go forward. And construction work, we've got January 2023. It's more likely to be February or March, but early 2023, we expect that work to begin. And then again, the reimbursements on a quarterly basis for their actual costs on that. But we've allocated for that one $200,000 based on the 4 units. So Culpeper Community Development Corporation, this is what they're calling the Parkside Project. So it's adjacent or fairly close to Yow Meadow Park on off of Sperryville Pike in Culpeper. Agreement was signed. This is the first agreement we signed back in June. They put in a low-income housing tax credit to Virginia Housing back in March of this year, which was awarded. So that's sort of what we were waiting on, was the additional funding for that project to feel comfortable signing on with them. And again, that's going to be a construction anticipated to complete it by December 2024 or earlier. And People Incorporated, this is similar, 60 units, and this is the project where the town and county of Culpeper have, I don't say donated, but transferred parcels to People Incorporated for this development. Lightfoot Apartments, I think is what they're calling it. Same thing, they submitted a low-income housing tax credit application last March, and that was awarded in June. And we anticipate construction to be completed by December of 2024. So the two projects that we don't have agreements yet, first one is with Rappahannock-Rapidan Community Services, and this is in the town of Orange. It used to be the building that housed Sheltering Arms in the town. What RRCS had proposed was a demolition and then construction of the new building with 18 units. Their application and the other materials indicated the ability to meet that June 30, 2024 deadline. When we had follow-up conversations with them in May, they indicated that, oh, we've actually been working with a outside consultant, and he's recommended going in for a low-income housing tax credit application, which is great. I think they probably need it, but that really pushes their project back to an application that wouldn't even go in until March of 2023, and then would not be available for them to draw that money until January 2024, which really doesn't give them, in staff's opinion, enough time to complete that project based on Virginia Housing's deadlines. That's sort of our communication. I've communicated to staff at RRCS that we're not comfortable moving forward with a signed agreement on this. They've indicated their disappointment at that, but that's sort of where we stand. And as part of our request today, we're going to be recommending unallocating those dollars from that project and kind of formally removing ourselves from it. We didn't sign any agreement, so it's not going to be a problem there. It's really just saying we put these out there, you weren't able to meet the requirements that we needed to follow up. And then with Fauquier Habitat, they had submitted their project. It was for 35 Corner Street, which is a property that would be a demolition and construction. They had a mixed-use development that they were pursuing in partnership with Boys and Girls Club of Fauquier County. Again, those discussions that we had with them, this was mostly September and October, was their concerns based on rising costs and the deadline for Virginia Housing of June 30, 2024. They were concerned about the ability to meet those deadlines and complete that project. So Jennifer and working with their staff, met with their staff and Virginia Housing, our program manager, about a potential alternative project in the Hayti Street neighborhood in Warrenton, which is an area where Fauquier Habitat has worked previously. And what they've proposed is an expansion of their existing efforts in that Hayti Street neighborhood. There's two properties that they own, 141 and 143 Hayti Street. They're vacant and uninhabitable, one due to fire, another one due to other issues. I guess there's some mold or water damage type things that make it uninhabitable. Again, they own both properties. And what they would be proposing here is demolition of those existing buildings and then redevelopment with homeownership units consistent with some of the past development they've done in that neighborhood. So we've put some bullet points there. I mean, the homeownership aspect is a positive for us. All the other projects that we received were rental units, which are needed and beneficial, but I think we would look at homeownership as a definite positive for this project. It's infill and redevelopment within an area where they're already working. Potential that it would be included in the statewide community land trust, which gives some affordability aspects to the land, where the land would not transfer with the person buying the house would not have the land would stay in the trust, and if they moved out in the future, you wouldn't see a huge increase in terms of the land value. Timeline's a concern because, again, wanting this to be hopefully done by June 30, 2024, and this would reduce, the original application was for 18 units, and this would produce 6 units. So really where we've landed at this point between Jennifer and myself is that tying any potential allocation, and certainly before getting to an agreement with Fauquier Habitat, would be tying the investment to construction. I don't really feel comfortable paying for some of their pre-development costs without a guarantee that the project would be completed. So that would be sort of what we would try to tie if the commission wanted to go in that direction with that project.
Are those 6 units by right zone?
That's my understanding, is that they're it's residential right now, and I would think that demolishing the buildings there, they could come back.
Sounded like you're taking down 2 houses, putting up 2 houses. What is it?
Well, it was
Where
2
do 6
houses
units
that had
come
multiple
from?
units,
Oh.
so I think that's where they would get it from. But do you know offhand, Jennifer?
Actually, she briefly mentioned something about rezoning for one of them, that I'm kind of under the impression that we're on the margins of by right versus a rezoning application.
And so some of this too, I think, is the approach that we've taken is allocating the money and then allowing a lot of those questions, especially with regards to land use and land use authority to and zoning specifically, to work themselves out before we sign any sort of formal agreement. And I will say in this case with this project, I feel like that's where we are, is that, you know, our recommendation from staff is to, you know, to reallocate the 300,000 we initially put from Fauquier Habitat to this new project, but really with the goal of getting all those questions answered before we, you know, sign anything with them. As it states there in that bullet point, you know, contingent on their ability to complete the project, but also, you know, in terms of identifying that it is vacant and uninhabitable, what sort of information does Virginia Housing require for that to be documented? Really, this is an opportunity, I think, from us to say that we'd still like to work with Fauquier Habitat on this new project, but ultimately feel like the commission is the one that has to say as to whether that makes sense or to unallocate if that was the case. Our other recommendation is, as I said, unallocate 300,000 from the RRCS project and currently leave that unallocated in our budget for future use, anticipating increase in costs on the other projects that we've awarded, and also anticipating if we extend our management of the project for an extra year and past June 30, 2024, any additional staff costs that we would have for that. And I would think we'd know better about that by April of next year, where those monies might go. So this would be the recommended allocations that we have, again, leaving the existing ones there with Skyline Cap, Foothills Housing Corporation, Habitat for the new project, People Incorporated, and Culpeper Community Development Corporation, our program and planning, and having 300,000 unallocated at this time, which would likely go to either support some of those additional costs in the future or again our staff.
Can I ask about Fauquier Habitat? Because that's in my,
Sure.
actually it's in my ward. They are actually they have a parallel application now, which they presented to town for $1 million in ARPA funding to support 10 units on Maytime Street. Now, I don't know whether that can be coordinated with something along these lines or whether or not, but that, in fact, I think that the funding that you either are unallocating or wish to reserve, I think may be a component of not of that, but of their effort on Maytime Street is to actually rebuild the entire street. It is Warrenton's, I would say, they call it that street. It is Warrenton's most visible street where low income families are not only associated with their poverty, but with crime. And ironically, it's next to Eagle Walker Park, which is supposed to symbolize a new day in our community development in terms of providing access to all our citizens, but it's right next to Haytime Street. So it's an ironic juxtaposition. I'm just saying that in terms of allocating these funds, I would hope that in unallocating them, that you make every effort to keep them around and that they're not reallocated elsewhere until Fauquier Habitat has a chance to get access to it.
Well, I appreciate that, Commissioner Simple, because that's sort of the approach that we've taken is we don't, whereas the RRCS project is one we just clearly see it's not going to be able to meet the deadline. The Fauquier Habitat project, assuming the commission is okay with, you know, the switch from the first proposal to this one, is one where we do see that, you know, having an ability, and your mention of the request to the town, I think part of that is helping us in terms of knowing, okay, how are you going to fund this entire project? And if, you know, if they weren't able to access.
Well, we don't know if they will, but it's just been preliminary. That Melanie Birch just delivered the application just a couple of weeks ago. So it's very early in that review.
And I think that's really where we are, is that those sorts of questions, we would need time to answer them, you know, to our own satisfaction as well. But that, you know, something where if we left it allocated for them, we could answer those questions without having an agreement signed initially.
All right. Thank you.
So that's the recommended allocations. I think just kind of real quick on the follow-up work that we're going to do is, you know, we're continuing to do our reporting and reimbursements quarterly with Virginia Housing. That has been a bit of a slow process, but based on a call we were on yesterday, I think Virginia Housing is finally getting some comfort in terms of their processes internally. Likely with, again, if the commission does approve this recommendation here today, we would come back in sometime between February and June of 2023 with how we want to reallocate that 300,000 or potentially additional funds, to projects or to admin time. And then continuing throughout the next year, the regional housing strategy follow-up work, which in the packet was some information just in terms of the work that we've done there. And I'll go back to that in just a second on that regional housing strategy. The other thing I wanted to highlight before, answering further questions is specifically for the RRCS project, and the other project that was submitted in February was from Heroes Bridge, which also has made some positive progression. We did not allocate funding towards them, but between those two projects and some other outreach we've had from potential partners, we feel pretty confident that we've probably got 4 or 5 projects that just couldn't meet the Virginia Housing deadline, and feel pretty confident about communicating back to Virginia Housing that if they were so willing and if they had the funding available, we would certainly be interested in continuing this program for another round, because we feel like there are projects that are in the pipeline here in the region that would benefit from the investments that we're able to make on it. So that sort of communication is ongoing, and I know that many of the other regional commissions across the state are thinking similarly on that. So I'm happy to answer questions on this. I did want to give Jennifer a chance to kind of go through just the couple of things on the that were included in the packet, just in terms of the strategy plan updates. Jennifer, is there any highlights you wanted to hit on that real quick?
Just from the highest level at this point, the strategy plan that I've been working on has been based on feedback and outreach as I've been talking to local planning staff and our FHN and other nonprofit partners, trying to get a general sense of what people feel the needs are in the region. And I took that information and combined it with the data that we got from the housing study and looked at, tried to look at a high level, what would be a broad strategy or a broad vision strategy for the region as far as meeting the housing needs and addressing the conditions across the region. That's next page, I guess, if you wouldn't mind. So these pages kind of give you a broad, again, that broad perspective. It's the goals and objective and some of the strategic activities that we're trying to associate with those goals, the areas that we can explore and expand on. A lot of this was written with the idea in mind that here at the commission, we provide the planning and we can provide planning and technical support to our localities, as well as our Foothills Housing Network partners in different capacities to help educate and inform, provide some outreach opportunity, provide some supportive outreach opportunities, because the what I'm hearing through some of the feedback from the Department of Community Housing and DHCD, did I get that backwards? And Virginia Housing, Housing Forward Virginia, just a lot of different agencies at the state level referring to the JLARC report and the McGuire Woods report. It sounds like the current administration is going to be taking a deep dive looking into housing across the state. So what I've been learning from those different resources, I've been trying to figure out a way to marry the state goals with our local comprehensive plans and what's realistic for our region. And so this information, I'm hoping as early as January, I'll be pushing out to our local planning staff and nonprofit partners and other interested parties to gain some feedback and see what areas we can work in and what areas we can explore further.
And I would say too, related to the Governor Youngkin's administration, I'm sure many of you saw the release on some of his housing plans, and I know some of those are maybe come up in our legislative discussion later, but the potential impacts on, land use and local zoning authority and things like that, and related to housing, I know that's of concern to many of you. So I think, serving as a convening point, or, kind of circulating and pulling together information related to that as it comes up in your local discussions as well, would be a role that we'd certainly be happy to fill. But really, I think what we've, and as Jennifer said, we've tried to take a very high level approach to where we fit into this, and where we can support not only your staff, but yourselves and other partners, through this process. So that sort of is the update on this. I mean, we were seeking and are seeking approval for the kind of recommended new allocation plan. But again, I'm happy to answer questions on any of those if there are more questions on the kind of process to date.
Habitat, they know your decision.
So we've told them that we had to bring it to the commission for discussion and kind of get a sense. We had sort of at this point said, we feel good about maintaining that, allocation with them, but, couldn't commit to that. And, again, really our process is allocating that funding towards them means that they can, sort of count on it as long as they meet the requirements that we put out in terms of, them saying we can meet the project deadlines, and, we've got the support that we need financially from, other sources.
I'm just a little confused. Are you taking it out of the?
No, for Habitat, we would be leaving, we're recommending leaving their 300,000.
I'm sorry. I thought you were.
No, sorry, I'm sorry that I thought it was.
No, I'm sorry. Excuse me, fellow commissioners. What 300,000 is being unallocated?
From the Rappahannock-Rapidan Community Services
Oh, I'm
Project, which
sorry.
was
Okay.
in Town of Orange, and that's purely because of the project deadline.
And I started with a basic misconception,
Yeah.
and I'm glad. I mean, thank you for
Yeah,
the
they
clarification.
probably won't be ready based on what we're dealing with them in the county.
Yeah.
Since we're the property owners there, they've got a long ways to go. A
And
long ways to go.
I appreciate that, Mr. Crozier. I think that's something where, again, we're, in general, we're supportive of the project itself, but just in this case, we really went into it thinking that we were going to have a little more flexibility on Virginia Housing's end. And then when we found that it's not as flexible as we thought, then we sort of had to kind of figure out, okay. And also, I mean, they did say, Jennifer and I spent a lot of time talking. They signed off on the application. They said, yes, we can conclude by June 30, 2024. And I just don't think that's the same case now.
Yeah, definitely not. And it might give them a little incentive to come back with a better proposal than what they've had. I'd like to see them do it. I'd like that property to be raised with something decent put in there. Absolutely. But
Heather, could you put up the screen with your recommendations for this? Or just,
For the February, what was currently allocated, or?
no, for what you want us to vote on today, whether to unallocate or
Okay, yeah.
just so everybody's clear on
Thank you.
what the staff recommendations are and what we were asked to approve. You've got another question?
Yeah, I do. I'm disappointed. I appreciate all the work, and I'm disappointed at the results. As you know, I spent some time reviewing all these, and I feel a little bit upset that there are other applicants who had put forth applications and they are not going to get funding. And it ends up that there is money left over in the pot now because what happened with these one or two projects. And I guess, I understand this is a new program and it's really difficult to try to assess, but is there a way that, or do you all have plans to do some kind of assessment of what might be factors to look at that would lead to success for future applicants, if there are applicants? Kind of what are things that you see might be portions of, this is dangerous and it might work, such as some questions about property ownership, questions about zoning, other things that you might be able to put into the whole decision-making process before you get to that point. And again, I do not want to criticize what you guys done, because I know you did a great job of pulling everything together. The Virginia Housing Corporation, whatever they are, didn't give us a whole lot of time to work with this. But it feels like when we went through this process as commissioners and looked at this, we were trying to look at things and based upon the merit of the work, But now we've learned a little bit, and are you all thinking about adding some kind of evaluative system that brings in some of these other factors and putting some weight on them and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think I'll let Jennifer speak to it as well. I think, yeah, we have learned a lot through this first process. And I think, whether we put some sort of evaluation, but I think waiting and really looking at, to your point, the site control has been a big aspect. I think the other funding sources that applicants are looking to use is another critical piece. Again, the percent that we're putting towards the large projects in Culpeper,
Right.
less than 3% of their overall
Right.
project costs. So it's a very small contribution, but that also means that, making sure that, okay, all of your other costs are in place. And that's something where we did wait to sign until they had their housing tax credits in place. So I think we've had initial thoughts about that. I think the other thing that we've really focused on is really trying to, how can we incentivize homeownership, because that is a wealth building opportunity rather than, having some, apartment complexes or.
Right.
Couldn't you base the value and evaluation process on something comparable to what economic development does in their tier process?
Meaning like Virginia Economic Development Partnership, the tier 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, we certainly could. I mean, in terms of, identifying what, the critical pieces are. Again, I think the main ones that we've looked at, and I think would be easy to identify, are the site control. Number of units is probably but again, that's largely dependent on the appetite of the locality to support, larger projects. And I think that would be something that if there was interest and again, in the hope that there would be another round of funding for Virginia housing, if that's something the commission wanted to see, then we would spend more time, kind of developing that to be a little more clear. I don't want to necessarily say that we could put something in place just like the tax credit application program, which has a large number of requirements and that sort of thing. But if it's something where we need to be a little more transparent about, how we're making those decisions, then we can definitely look into that.
Well, I don't mean to make any criticism about transparency. It's just that there are these other factors, and somehow if you want us as commission members to look like we actually know what we're talking about a little bit when we're asked to look into these things and get your feedback about some of these weighted issues would be helpful throughout this process. And I don't know if any of the other regions, you have connections with them, whether they're dealing with the same challenge and whether someone else has done the formula. We're not asking you to do it.
Right. Yeah, I think, and again, Jennifer, if you've got thoughts, please feel free. I think one thing that we've heard from the other regions is that I think one of the things we went into it was looking at how can we support projects across the region and not pick one project. I mean, the $1.8 million could really support one of these projects at a higher level. But I think at least for this first round, we sort of looked at, well, and I think we've done it. I think the results are good in terms of we've got, different size projects and across the region. But that's, again, it's a small contribution to some of these projects. And so if that's something that we wanted to consider as well. But I think in general, this I hate the term, but building the airplane as you're flying it has been how this program has developed across the state. And we're all sort of, kind of responding to different directions from Virginia housing, but also hearing what other places are doing. And so that would be a good idea for a second round. So
If I may, the other PDCs, just in conversations that I've had with them, some of them dumped all their money into one project. Other ones went and distributed across their regions according to population, as opposed to the way we did projects. So there's a lot of different ways that we can approach this. In this case, we were trying to see, I think the approach, if you would agree with this, Patrick, I think the approach was how do we maximize these dollars to make sure that we're touching on as many parts of the region as possible. When we received those, was it 9 proof of concepts? I mean, we had over $6.2 million.
Right.
I mean, over
Right.
3 times what we were being provided by Virginia Housing. Some of those projects, like 3 of them came from Fauquier Habitat for Humanity alone. So when it came to the actual application, they just said, oh, we're not even going to go there. So that took 2 of those out of that process. But the one project that I really had my heart set on, in all honesty, was Heroes Bridge, but they just were having one problem after another, finding a parcel of property that could support this project. And so more recently, we did hear from Molly Brooks, and she said they partnered with a church who is looking at hosting their project, and they were going to do a land lease. So I'm excited to hear that that project's moving forward. Unfortunately, they're still not going to fit within the time frame, and that was our concern from the very beginning when she agreed that Virginia Housing, the 3-year time frame was not enough to develop a program
Right.
and fund the construction process. So we literally felt like we were pulling our hair out at times trying to pull this together.
No, and I appreciate everything you did. I guess the only other question is has the Virginia Housing, have they come up with some kind of mechanism for all the collective wisdom that has been brought together to share it with all of you all, so that if and when there is a second round, that you have access to that collective wisdom?
Yeah, there's monthly calls between all the PDCs and Virginia Housing to talk about work status of projects, where they're at on.
But also
reimbursements.
some kind of statistical accumulation of everything.
Yeah, and I think that's something, actually, I was at a meeting with other commission executive directors on Friday, and we talked a lot about, okay, is there a way that, all of us jointly as regional commissions can use this not only as a best practices, but also a success story, and communicating that impact of what we're doing. So I think that's in process. I don't think there's a formal, description of how that's going to happen, but I think that
But it's in
framework
process.
is there. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I just think one of the questions that's asked is, how are you going to determine whether you're getting the biggest bang for the buck for your investment? And that's not always measured by the size of the units or the number of things. It's measured in a community basis on its visibility. For example, the Ben and Mary's has been a landmark in Fauquier County for decades. And that now will become a housing project. Will be along Route 17, is going to be highly visible and supporting, I guess, our other efforts, which will also require some when I can advance advertising for us to get further along in our own affordable housing projects as we conceive them in the town.
Again, I just wanted to say that I do appreciate all the work that went into this. I remember when this first came before us, do we want to do this, and how on earth are we going to do this? Because it's just something brand new. And like I said, I'm sure there are many, many times pulling your hair out trying to figure out how to build this plane. So, and I do think just in what you're showing us here, what's happening is all very positive and very exciting. And it's good to see. So with that, if you have,
I would move that we adopt the updated allocation formula.
that was my next thing. Thank
I'd
you.
second that.
Okay, any further discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor of the recommended allocations, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thanks again. Okay, next up, the commission was awarded funding from the U.S. Economic Development Administration to develop a comprehensive economic development strategy earlier this year. So would you give us a status update on that?
Yeah, and I'll move through this fairly quickly, because we're not, certainly haven't gotten this process underway yet, but just to give you an update on where we are. Background information, I think, as we've talked about in past commission meetings, it says is really a strategy-driven plan, pulling together economic development at a regional level. It's broader than just, I think, traditional economic development in terms of sites or utility infrastructure, things like that. This really does get into a more comprehensive approach, including housing, transportation improvements, quality of life initiatives can also be encouraged to be part of the SEDS. There's background information there, but really the bullet points that we're going to have to produce over the next 15 months or so. Summary background, which you do with just about every plan, but then a SWOT analysis of the region and its economic development opportunities, and then some of the threats to the region. Then developing strategic actions and direction. Then creating an evaluation framework, and then also throughout the document, really, it's the, you know, as everybody, you know, talks about now, it's about building resiliency, not just in, you know, like we talked about earlier with the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, but also economic resiliency in terms of workforce and how you respond to things such as a pandemic or other items there. Again, bringing together diverse interests, and that's public and private, nonprofit interests as well. We'll integrate with some of the other plans I could talk about, hazard mitigation, comprehensive plans locally, tourism, quality of life. And really, you know, an opportunity for, you know, capitalizing and identifying the assets that a lot of times we talk about either in this room or other meetings at a regional or a local level, that just sort of make the region unique. You know, and really using those assets to develop a strategy for economic development that makes use of what we have and what we want to be, but not a cookie cutter approach of here's how we're going to do economic development. I think the other thing too is, you know, wanting to make sure throughout this process that the work that you all are doing locally, and I mean, you know, most of you have an economic development department or a staff that's working on that and have done a lot of this stuff locally, and so wanting to make sure that we're pulling that information in and not going over top of that and creating something that doesn't reflect the work that's already gone into it regionally. Just background on why a SEDS. I mean, generally it's a region, a vehicle for a region such as ours and your localities to access additional funds, primarily for infrastructure or business development, some of the money through U.S. Economic Development Administration. Indirectly, it's good for, you know, being able to cite in a grant application or some other funding request. Hey, we've got this project identified as part of our development strategy with our region. It's a prerequisite for designation as an economic development district for EDA. I would certainly highlight that that's probably not likely to happen anytime soon. Even after we get a SEDS, it's said to be a 1 to 2 year process to get that designation. In practice, it's more like 5 or 6, according to other PDCs that I've spoken with recently. And then, you know, the other thing is that it will, as part of the identification of strategies and actions, will designate organizations, individuals, other stakeholders that are going to take the lead. I've been pretty clear with other presentations and other partners I've talked with SEDS about. This is not a plan that is supposed to say, here's what the regional commission is going to do on this. There's certainly going to be actions that say the regional commission can take the lead, but in a lot of cases, it needs to be other organizations or other stakeholders that are better positioned to take the lead on some of the outcomes that we expect to see through this process. So, you know, some of this we talked about when we made the application, but just wanted to highlight for you. 12 of the 21 planning districts in Virginia are designated as economic development districts. Out of the other areas that are not designated, 5 of those planning districts have completed a SEDS process. So if you do your math, that's 4 regions left. One of which is ours, one of which is Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission in Charlottesville. So that's why we partnered with them. And the feedback we got from EDA to our applications that went in separately, but basically together, was that approach was something they really found innovative and were interested in seeing how that goes. As a reminder, we're going to do a SEDS for our region. TJPDC will have a SEDS for their region. And because of Go Virginia Region 9 support, we're going to have, you know, a chapter or a section that ties both of those things together that provides some greater capacity for some of the organizations that span both our regions in Go Virginia, Virginia Career Works, Piedmont region, and then Central Virginia Partnership, which includes 3 of our counties and the entirety of the TJPDC. Links to some examples if you're interested, and I'll send these slides around after the meeting as well as post them on our website. So the process to date, March of this year, applications were submitted to the EDA from both our organization and from TJPDC. Back in July, we had received follow-up and executed the award with EDA for funding. And then in September, we released a joint RFP. Our office was the one that sought the proposals, and that was looking for, you know, proposals that were going to conduct the 3 primary tasks. So our SEDS process, the SEDS process for TJPDC, and that sort of super regional approach. We did receive 8 proposals. We had 3 staff members here, 2 at TJPDC, and then we had partners at Central Virginia Partnership and Go Virginia Region 9 that also reviewed, interviewed 3 of the respondents just virtually and follow up, and then we did post a notice of intent to award to Camoin Associates in November and have a draft contract for them, which is in review right now from Camoin. So really the process over the next 15 to 18 months, and this kind of timeline there starts January 2023. And this is largely driven by the work that the consultant's going to do. But you can see just the type of work that's going to be done, that sort of the timeline there. We would anticipate through this having a draft plan available end of next year, early part of 2024. But throughout this process, I think what you're going to see is requests from internally from us and from the consultant, not only for your participation just in either feedback or surveys, but also in identifying, and this is sort of a slide about how you can be involved, also identifying for us who the consultant Camoin needs to be talking to. If you recall, Camoin was the group that worked on our housing study. I felt like that process worked pretty well in terms of an opportunity for a stakeholder committee, which we'll be forming, but then also a much broader audience in terms of who they would interview and who would participate in focus groups. So really what we're going to be asking for from you over the next year or so, and probably more so in the beginning part of 2023, is that feedback on not only providing your own insights into economic development and the region, but also identifying some of the other people that would be beneficial for us to talk to, as well as to that may be good participants on our kind of stakeholder committee, which will probably meet, probably quarterly or so during that process. Other things that you can do is really just if you see us send information out, or if you see, if you get an email from me or anyone else about, hey, we're having this meeting or we're going to have this, just pass that along. If you're not able to participate, pass it along to somebody that would be the right person, either from your local government or just your broader network. As I talked about, the other thing is that SEDS is a broader definition of economic development. So just kind of be open to thinking about how you can incorporate housing, transportation, tourism, quality of life benefits as part of this entire process. And then as we start to identify strategies, if there are specific strategies that are specific to your locality or projects that you're already working on that would benefit from being included, that's the sort of thing that we need to hear during this process. It's not meant to be only identifying new things that have never been talked about before. It's really also about capturing the things that are currently successful or poised to be grow and be more successful as well.
Patrick, can you send us that?
Yes, and I will pull that one out specifically. So that's it. I mean, that was really just the update. I really wanted to give you a sense of we've completed the procurement process for most of it, and anticipate having that contract signed later this month with Camoin, and working, really the other piece that I really went into was
Your general definition up there is missing one major component
which one?
that everybody here thinks about, and it's generating revenue for the jurisdiction.
And that's helpful, Mr. Deal, in terms of the other piece too of, for us taking that back. I think a lot of times from a regional level, that's not something that is our first and foremost thought, but that's helpful to be able to frame it that way as well. So we will be doing kind of, the process internally with the consultant team is we're going to have, at minimum, depending on how things are going, at minimum, it'll be monthly coordination between our staff, TJPDC staff, and the consultant team. And again, kind of coming back every, quarterly, or maybe sometimes more often, depending on how the process is working, to have that broader stakeholder SEDS committee engaged, which again is something I reached out to most of you, earlier in the fall, and I appreciate many of you that responded with, okay, yeah, here's some people that you might want to talk to, or you might want to add to that committee. So we started to build that list, but that'll be sort of an ongoing process, as well as terms of identifying who we want to talk to and who we need to talk to throughout this process. So I'm happy to answer questions on that as well. As to where we stand.
Thank you, Patrick. I guess we'll move on then to new business. There's just a couple of items under new business today. First off is a request for an operating grant, FY 2024 Commuter Assistance Program operating grant. If you want to review that request.
Yeah, very general. I mean, this is an annual grant that we put into Department of Rail and Public Transportation for the commuter services program. It supports 1.5 full-time equivalent staff positions here, and then as well as the outreach and the advertising and marketing initiatives related to that rideshare program. I put this is a sort of a cap of the most that we would ask for as part of this request. That the application is not actually due till February 1st, but with the commission not slated to meet fully until after that time. Typically, we put this in December for your consideration. I do anticipate probably this year, certainly with Lindsay on board, I think we're gonna, really review the way we've been doing things and potentially, look at opportunities to kind of grow the program and also grow our outreach. We've had a couple of positive things that have come in. One is a secondary commuter database, which is much easier than the one that has traditionally been available. So we're looking to kind of take the way that we have been doing things, but also giving Lindsay the opportunity to come in and make some recommendations within the first several months that she's here. So this would be for FY 2024. So next July through June 2024 would be the timeframe for that. But again, happy to answer questions, but this has been a consistent funding source for us for a long time.
If there are no questions, do we have a motion on this?
So move. Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, then 11B is the regional legislative priorities request from Mr. Eldon James. The commission has offered its endorsement of the platform in past years and may do so again this year. Or you can also offer any suggestions for edits or additional items. Patrick, can you review the changes from past years?
Yeah, I would certainly thank the chief administrative officers from counties and the towns in the region who served as primary reviewers on some of this with Eldon over the past couple months. The memo really outlines the changes from the past years. If you recall, last year was the first year that we had sort of separated from the Fredericksburg area, which traditionally this had been for 25 years, I think, had been what they call BACO Region 7. So Fredericksburg area, all of the counties around Fredericksburg, and then our region. But last year we split off. They had ended their relationship with Eldon on the regional legislative piece. Fauquier County very kindly was going through procurement and wrote in a task for this regional legislative piece. So this year, some of the changes really elevated the mental health services, specifically with TDO references to a priority issue. This has been something that's been in the platform for many years, but obviously it's a priority for several regions and obviously for the governor's administration with his announcement earlier this week on the mental health kind of task force that's going to be looking into a lot of these issues. So, wanting to support that. That dropped out children's services just to another issue which will remain there, and certainly one that could elevate just depending on how things go in the future. Revise some of the other things, broadband specifically to looking for an opportunity of how the state would consider, or if the state would be open to considering options for reconciling past investments that localities have made, given the fact that most localities in this region, even prior to ARPA, had made significant investments into broadband and not just paying for future opportunities. Revise the transportation section, largely to take things from the Fredericksburg area that really had no relevance here in our region out. I think thanks to Mr. Curry, we added a regulation of event spaces, just section under other issues, just regards to agritourism venues. And then strengthen language under the local land use authority and affordable housing, sort of like we talked about earlier, just to make sure that any changes or any push from the state, that there is an ability to recognize that that's something that is considered here. And then lastly, we removed one that was resolved related to public meetings of regional bodies such as ours. So happy to go through in more detail, but it's fairly similar except for those changes that I talked about. And I would say that Eldon is always responsive, not just to myself, but also to if any of you have questions. I think would be something he's always happy to talk through and take that input as part of the process.
Have anything? Add, remove, anything? No? Okay, if there's no issues with that, we need a motion for consideration of endorsing these priorities.
So
Second.
Okay, motion in a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Okay, last but not least, the commission needs to appoint a nominating committee to identify a slate of officers for terms beginning March the 1st of 2023. As a reminder, all three officers are in the final year of their terms and we will be seeking new officers through the process. Typically the executive committee, but we can leave it at that to serve as the nominating committee, or if
I would
anybody.
so move.
That works. No alternative. Is there a second to that, to let the executive?
Second.
Committee? Okay. Any other? All those in favor then?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
I always say that you want to volunteer for that committee, because if not, they'll just appoint you. Now that the vote's been taken.
Okay, that's good. All right, we don't have any closed session items, so I guess we will move to the regional roundtable. I guess
We'll
Mr.
start
Sickle?
with town and Warren.
Yeah, go right.
I have no prepared remarks. We are looking for a new town manager. Chris Martino went from what I think, I can't remember what the budget is over there in Prince William County. 30 billion to a budget of about 38 million. So he was our interim manager and his contract ends in February. And we just put it out on the street, and I'll be happy to give you a little update later as to what the particulars are. It's available on our website. The job has been characterized as challenging. Warrenton is in the middle of a number of difficult issues, one of which is the council just has gotten into a little bit of a dispute with our planning commission, which feels it hasn't had enough information to make a decision and decided to defer it until it received it. And our council, not everybody agreed with this idea, wants to push it to a public hearing in January at the request of the applicant, who happens to be Amazon. That has created quite a bit of consternation in the town and among our citizens. And we are going to be faced with a very interesting January meeting, to say the least. It has this more, unlike our sister counties who have already indicated a preference for data centers, Loudon and now Prince William and the Rural Crescent. We are at this threshold between us and Rappahannock and the glories of the Blue Ridge. We're trying to, and most of the energy that is coming from our residents who would like to keep Warrenton the way it is are those who have moved there over the last 15, 20 years. And it is I think, and it's the challenge is this could be a turning point in how the town will look, because we have available to us some industrial land that is now under comprehensive plan dedicated for other purposes. That is just sitting there, ripe for Dominion, put in a substation and these data centers to sprout what some may fear like weeds. So it is a critical point, I think, in the history of our town. So, and I may be informative to other of our commissioners here who face similar issues regarding revenue and the need for revenue and how to balance that with the desire of the residents to keep their town a quaint place, or they believe is a quaint place that is not surrounded by these monolithic buildings. So that's the end of my report. I'm sorry, I don't think Chris ever came down here. We never met. Did Chris ever come to one of them? I was not able, I was for medical leave. I wasn't able to attend the annual meeting. I'm sorry I missed it. It was in the glorious county of Rappahannock.
Yeah.
And where I lived at one point. So I certainly was sorry to hear that. So that's the news, and I generally present news that is not necessarily positive, but I hope is informative. Thank you.
Town of Washington knows nothing about the fact that people who moved into the area want to preserve it. That's something I think my colleagues across the table and I have to deal with on a constant basis. The only major thing that we have is we have this project, Rush Rivers, it is now called, that has received its final site plan approval, and they are doing the digging. This project, while small compared to what many of you Goliaths are doing, for us as a David, this is a big thing for us. It will have 14 affordable housing units. It will have a permanent location for the county food pantry. It'll have some office space, which I believe is going both to nonprofit and governmental services. So it's going to be a wonderful boon for both the town and I think the greater community. So we're very excited that that is finally rolling along and going forward. And I will leave it at that.
I said, we went through our bid process. As you know, we're required to take down our standpipe and put up a new one, which provides, we got our bids in last week, I think. I was very happy with the standpipe bids. They were about $500,000 less than what was anticipated. So we felt very good about that. We also got our bids in on the liquid feed system for the water plant. Those things came in about 6 times more than what was expected. And it just won't go. I mean, it's a 3-sided cinder block building for 2.1 million. No way. We won't do that. I think these people have enough jobs to do out there with all the ARPA money. So they throw out a big, huge number. And if
You forced me to take it, I'll take it.
yeah, I can make a lot of money. I'll cancel something else. That's really what we see it falls down to. Because there's just no way the thing should cost. It should cost around $500,000 tops. The low bid was 2.1 million. It was ridiculous. We had our Christmas parade, which was very well attended. I think it was for the Rotary Club. It was very nice.
For Madison County, some of it you already covered, but whether it's in the town or Madison County, we're appreciative of the efforts. I think we have another comprehensive plan committee coming up in January, so we look forward to that. Also although it changed ownership from Mesa over to Skyline Cap, I think the mission continues. I appreciate your assistance for that, and being strategically located right near their headquarters provides the oversight and assistance that may be needed by those who will occupy that space. So thank you all. Madison County is still out there at the early stages for broadband. I know folks, when they see the awards that are usually given through the BATI grant in December, they think that happens overnight. Our county is in out of the 6 stages, which the last stage we have service to your home, we're in the make ready. So Firefly is telling us by August 2025, the project will be complete. So we just gave that information, that update to the board of supervisors. Budget process, everybody's fun times. Ours will start. Well, we've already began with our budget calendar, but that will start. Outside agencies will get their forms at the end of this week, along with departments, due back by the end of January, and we'll start meeting with folks throughout that time. Outside of that, we have a radio project. It's been ongoing. We're still trying to nail down our western site. So when we figure that out, Gary.
You haven't nailed that site down?
We haven't, but we hope to have some news that you'll hear first before the commission, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, that will be maybe more favorable. We did erect our tower at our park over at Hoover Ridge. That will be a county-owned site, so there are benefits to that. And we're working with Firefly to situate or locate a fiber hut at that location. So there's multiple benefits for that. So we hope to get that done soon. We've got our PER back for our park project, which encompassed a splash pad, so we're to rock water, an accessible playground, hockey rink, a couple of other multiple courts. It came in roughly about 3.2 million as estimates. So this was not a bid. This is just an idea of what it may cost, and will the board incorporate that into their capital plan. You looked about the same, Mr. Crozier, as the board did last night. So we will see if that makes the cut for the CIP.
Beyond 5 years.
beyond 5 years. That's how I like the term. You have 5 years where you have costs, and then I like it, but put it towards year 15 or 20. So we'll see if it makes the plan. So that's about all I have to report, other than I will have to leave here shortly. We are closing on some property. The CSB was able to purchase property for us, from us, at our former administration center. That's going to allow us to have very valuable and important services in the county that went away many years ago. So we're excited about that. Lastly, we're not excited about, we are closing on the former rescue squad property today. So that it's a little sticker shock, but sometimes that's how politics play out. I believe Orange County probably went through similar. So we're going to forge your path or follow your path. But, that is happening. So we'll look forward to what renovations cost will be to the taxpayers. So that's all that's going on in our neck of the woods.
The next 5 years, sir.
So most recent things going on in Orange, we had a workshop with our board to talk about Parks and Rec planning and facility space planning, and have a kind of loose outline of those projects that we're going to start moving forward in more detail planning, get some PERs on them, or move some that we have a little bit more information into design development, and one a trail project with a sort of picnic area and what have you down in the mountain track road area, that moved that toward bidding. So still not sure about some of the areas. Just we bought some land in Unionville. We're going to kind of think about that a little bit more. We may also kind of look at putting a fire and rescue facility there. The largest rezoning the county's ever had in play right now, that could influence kind of what goes on the far east end of the county. That is known as Wilderness Crossing, and that goes to the Planning Commission in January. So we'll see where that goes. It's
Would you like to rephrase that? The planning commission may finally hear it in
after 2
January.
years. After 2 years. It has numbers that are kicking around, maybe up to 6,000 residential units, town center, quite a few hundred acres for economic development purposes. So it's all sort of working its way through. It's between Route 3 and the Rappahannock River.
Hopefully you have a school site in there somewhere.
There's a school site, fire rescue site, park site, a lot of good stuff. So we'll see where that goes. One kind of interesting interplay there is it's across the highway from Lake of the Woods. Lake of the Woods is concerned about their entrance and the traffic backup that happens there from time to time. There's some proposals from VDOT on how to deal with that. Well, that's change, and so some of the folks rising up in Lake of the Woods are opposed to that. So I'm anyone's guess where that might land, but that'll be fun to watch. PEC is certainly involved in lobbing grenades into the Facebook ecosphere against the project for some time now, trying to see what sticks. We're also still working on our CTE issue with the schools. We kind of had an unsuccessful, though cordial, workshop with the school board. They have a new superintendent who's now trying to understand the lay of the land and create a strategy that sort of bridges the different positions between his board and the board of supervisors, and the land options and the existing facility options and the modalities of delivering career and technical education. So again, don't know quite where that will land, but he's trying to understand it and bring some consensus over time. And that's probably what it needs, is some new leadership that can kind of spend the time on it. So got that going. Our building project for public safety and our radio project are now complete. We got some loose ends to tie up, but they're officially complete. So if anybody's some of you have been out there, and we're happy to give tours. People seem to like it. If you're in the middle of that work, we're happy to share what we
learned and what we would do differently and what's going well. Thanks very much.
Well, here, the Board of Supervisors will, has formally kicked off its process to hire a new county administrator. The packets will be going out in January. Would anticipate that probably by sometime in March, they will have identified a candidate and moved on down the road towards that. So they're working through that. At the same time, they'll be working through the normal budget process. Thankfully, we're in the second year of a biennium budget that we do. So it'll be an easier process. It's also made easier by the fact that it's an election year coming up for the board. So I've already been told they don't want a tax increase. Having said that, at least 2 of our board members have already announced that they will not be running. Again, all 5 are up for re-election, and so we'll see what the other 3 have to say shortly. But there is the potential for 3 to hold over or none of them to hold over. And so
That's interesting dynamic with hiring a new administrator.
it is. It was going to make it quite interesting, so it'll make it for an interesting 2023. So happy holidays to you all.
How much is your fire and rescue budget going on? I just couldn't resist.
Thank you very much.
Just to add a couple of things, this large rezoning we've been working on for 11 years. And we're just now having people say, oh my God, we don't want this. Where did this come from? Nobody told us about it. Well, they obviously have not come out of their groundhog holes for an entire lifetime. And people, like it's true in so many things, they look at the headline, they don't look at the actual facts. And once they hear the facts, it makes a pretty big difference. Something else, we did have a county administrator that whined that he didn't have fiber at his house. So on his behalf, we're putting fiber in Lake of the Woods. No, Ted just happens to have moved into the lake and
Mr. Frank
was the I have 115 houses in there. Section 7.
Section 7 is the first.
Which he happens to live in. So I just had to give him a hard time, but
Totally different government agency. That's the broadband.
That's right.
oh, absolutely, it has nothing to do with the board. So at any rate, FiberLink will be up to 3,500 customers by the end of the year. Considering that April a year, we did not have one customer, we've done fairly well. And we're actually getting recognized by the Fredericksburg Area Association of Realtors. They've done a 2-year study of fiber and broadband and anything associated with it within their region. And they are presenting an award to Orange County Broadband Authority for the work that they've done. One thing that's nice is it is all underground. So if we get this weather tomorrow, as long as somebody's got a UPC backup in their house, if they lose electricity, they'll still have fiber. So going well, and we're moving forward. One of the things that Ted mentioned about Parks and Rec, we hopefully will officially earmark the monies, but we're getting
A siting agreement.
Siting agreement. I want to say signing bonus. A siting agreement from Dominion, and their first upfront payment will be just under $1 million, which we're going to earmark strictly for Parks and Recreation, so that we can kickstart that and hopefully earmark all future monies from any of those fine things until they become obsolete in 2 years when Dominion goes totally nuclear.
Fusion, maybe.
Yes, that's.
How big is that solar farm? Is that a solar farm?
No, it is a solar facility, sir.
Solar facility, it's not a
It is
farm.
not a
That's good
farm.
point.
Come to a meeting and I will school you completely on that, sir.
Solar industrial facility.
Yes, but
65 megawatts.
Yeah. It's a million. And we have a number that are strategically planning how they're going to approach the board to attempt to get cited in the county. But any of those facilities are by special use permit and all. So, but we're very happy overall with the way everything's going, and I give them a hard time a lot of the time, but Ted has really stepped up the game for our county, especially not just for the citizens, but for the employees.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Yeah, our
Appreciate that.
employees are, because of his work, are being treated extremely well. And they have rifles to shoot anybody that's doing a pay study. Thank you.
If anybody's has heard or is familiar with Medicaid expansion issue, I'd love to talk to you after the meeting, because with the budget coming on, from what I'm understanding, is the state is putting the burden on the locale to take over Medicaid expansion applications and hiring positions, I guess, for the larger counties that deal with that to facilitate those applications, which is going to potentially cost us $200,000 or $300,000 if we can't plead to the state to get them to fund it throughout the state of Virginia. So if you haven't heard about it, it's probably going to be coming forward. That's all.
Is that the dedicated social services?
Mhm.
Okay.
I think there was, everybody was kind of frozen in the program for a couple of years, and that's ending. And so there's going to be a
Yes, they're
tsunami of.
They're taking the money away. They're taking the money away. Now they're making, with us, I think it's like 5,000 applications.
How do we wean them off the program?
Yes.
Do all the eligibility? Yeah, that is gonna be a challenge.
But with all the revenue that the state has now, which from what I'm hearing, it's an additional $12 billion over the last 2 years of additional revenue that's coming in. I mean, I don't see any reason why they can't take over the burden for that on the, instead of giving it to the locality, because they basically was at fault with the problem in the first place.
Interesting. Well, Mr. Eggertson, since you're kind of speakers in the middle of the table, why don't we get to you, since we were just talking about Culpeper? Do you have anything you'd like to share with us?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First off, I'm sorry not to be there, but having a bout with COVID, and I'm over it, but now my wife has it, and I don't want to ruin anybody's Christmas by spreading it around. So appreciate your letting me attend remotely. Not too much to report like everybody else. Budget season's now underway. Like Madison County, we've got a new comprehensive plan that the board is entertaining. In fact, they have a work session on Monday, and hopefully be ready to get that adopted within the next month or so. Our new field house was officially opened, and Chairman Deal was there, gave a great speech, and we all cut the ribbon, and that was a great day for us. So we're happy about that. And have some new pool concepts for our collaboration with the town on the pool that'll sit next to the field house. So that should be coming to our Buildings and Grounds Committee in probably February. And I think that's the big highlights for us.
Thank you.
I'll just be real quick. We're still struggling with the early stages of courthouse planning. Doing constructive criticism by some of our citizens and trying to turn that into positive forward momentum. So we'll see how that turns out. On the legislative front, we're obviously very concerned about the housing discussions and how it's this big bad counties who it's all our fault. We're in charge of economic development by building more rooftops, and squeezing more in the same place. That doesn't work very well for our community, so we'll be watching that closely.
If the past is any
evidence that the last time the development community got into strong positions, they ended up shooting themselves in the foot on proffers. I would imagine they have an interested ear from the administration just based on their tendencies. Though I'm excited about the TDO announcement, I'm not as excited about the zoning side. So.
I really don't have anything but a question. I'm wondering with the fiber projects that are going around in all of our counties as well as our bordering counties, if there would be any benefit in creating some sort of spreadsheet that shows where people are in the process. Just wondering if there's a way to learn he who goes first, if you find some lessons learned that we could all share together. I think for Rappahannock County anyway, I would be interested in seeing how it's going. Obviously, Orange has shown us all up, but that's okay.
So I think, knowing the project that Rappahannock and Fauquier are involved in, and then Madison, the neighboring planning districts as the lead agency, I think that could be, and Culpeper I know is working with All Points as well. So if there's a benefit, I guess I'd like to hear more about what the information that could be collected with, but yeah, I'm happy to try to pull that together. I think it's a very small subset of partners that we can try to impress upon.
Yeah, I think Culpeper is ahead of our regional group, so we'd really love to know where All Points might be stubbing their toe in Culpeper.
Yeah, we'd like to know too.
See, that's the thing with having a.
Well, I think we're going to know in
25 day-
January, John, correct? We're going to be hearing from All Points and I think we're going to be pretty adamant about a summary that is specific and detailed this time. And I think we're going to be talking with them to make sure we get that in January. Am I right, John?
Well, they aren't scheduled to appear in January. They did send a lengthy update that I shared with the board. Basically what they've said is that the number of REC poles that have to be upgraded as part of this project is an order of magnitude bigger than they thought. And so what they're telling us is that the project is still on its 18-month timeline and should be done at the end of 2023, but that the construction will move faster than they originally projected once it starts, but it won't start until probably the second quarter of 2023.
Just to give you a little point from a different region, Spotsylvania County may be parting ways with their fiber partner because they've discovered that contrary to what they may have said, they don't have the ability or the capability to do the fiber project. So just be wary.
Yeah,
That's
That's why I'd like the conversation to be open and often.
Chantel has publicly stated that they're sitting on the sidelines waiting for companies to fail so they can go.
I'm sure. And, rest assured, your bounty money is on the way if you were awarded it.
Or we finally had several of our larger construction projects move into the construction phase. We're moving forward with our parking lot and park project across the railroad tracks from the depot. We're acting as the prime contractor on that, which quite frankly, in this day and time is a lot easier than trying to find contractors. So we're moving forward with that. The 522 improvement project, that's 100% federally funded project. That's slowly moving forward. At least it's in the construction phase, and that clock is ticking, and our wastewater project is doing the same thing. The last big project that we had is our pedestrian bridge project. We were planning on accepting bids this week. Actually, we had a non-mandatory pre-bid conference a couple of weeks ago, had one prime contractor show up. Not very good to only have one, so we're gonna accept bids the end of January, and we've been beating the bushes and looking for some prime contractors. I think we found another one or two that we've begged them to bid. It's different being in the phase where you have to beg people to bid on the project.
You get big, bid like Rick.
That's all you can do.
Yeah.
Other than that, coordinating with the county on technology zone that's already county has identified that's in the town that was adopted last night to make it combined technology zone there, and working on some other issues with them on that. And as John mentioned, the pool. So I think that's most of those type of projects. Megan has
That
other
pretty much-
exciting things going.
That pretty much sums up the things that I was thinking of that we were doing. But we too had our Christmas parade and had a fabulous turnout for that. The other noteworthy thing, our chief of police, who many of you all saw when we gave him the leadership award in October, announced his retirement after 45 years on our in our department, and 12 of those as chief. So we hate to see him leave, but we're very pleased that he's going to be able to retire and hopefully enjoy his time. So with that, though, I want to wish everybody a happy holiday season, whatever holidays you celebrate and enjoy. I hope everybody has a wonderful time. And Patrick, do you have anything else? Okay, we need a motion, I guess, to adjourn.